Malaysian woman fights against the Islamic conversion of her kids. Loh Siew Hong, a Malaysian Hindu woman of Indian and Chinese descent, is embroiled in a contentious legal battle after her three children were forcibly converted to Islam by her ex-husband. The case, unfolding in a nation rife with ethnic and religious divides, has been spotlighted due to its deeply personal yet public implications. Loh, after a long and arduous 3-year search, managed to reunite with her children only to discover their religious conversion. Malaysian law forbids non Muslims from raising Muslim children, thereby complicating Loh's case. Despite an initial judicial setback, Loh appealed the ruling and her case is currently being held by the Malaysian secular courts. Amid a charged political climate as Malaysia head towards elections, Rozana Isa, the director of Sisters in Islam, notes, quote, people respond to this issue in a very emotional way because it's not just about the children. What comes into play is about how then Islam must be protected at all costs. What started as a private family dispute has escalated into a high stakes national issue, leading to Loh and her children being harassed and vilified for their perceived challenge to the Islamic faith. Her struggle illustrates the intertwined complexities of religion and politics in Malaysia. And as Loh's lawyer, um, Srimurugan Alagan, puts it, quote, the religious authorities feel that by giving in to Madam Loh, we are sacrificing our might of Islam, end quote. The outcomes of this case, which is expected to conclude by year's end, will set a precedent for Malaysia's approach to religion and personal freedom. So this is really, really important. And I will give more background. So this woman, whose first name is Loh, I don't really know how to pronounce the rest of her name. I apologize. She was married to a man, and they were a Hindu family together, and he was extremely abusive. So she managed to leave her husband. And when she left her husband, what her husband did is he kidnapped her children, took them from her, and then he converted to Islam and then converted the children to Islam. And she didn't see her kids for 3 years. After 3 years, they finally discovered where the children were. But what happened was they went to like the school where the children were and be like, oh, yeah, this is your kid, but now he goes by a different name. And it was like Irfan, like it was a very obviously Islamic name. She's like, oh, okay, well, whatever. Like she managed to get her kids back. Then the problem became her husband had converted the children to Islam without her permission. There's nothing in Malaysian law that says that children, because when you convert in Malaysia, this is like an official thing. The government is involved in documenting your conversion. And this is particularly important because in Malaysia, Malay Muslims are explicitly given privileged rights over the ethnically Chinese and Indian people in Malaysia. They're explicitly given privileged rights. They have preferential rights for property, education, payment, etc. So a lot of people convert to Islam in Malaysia so that they can have access to literally preferential rights and privileges in the country. And there is nothing in the law that says that you need the permission of both parents to do this. And this is particularly complicated because, okay, she finally found her kids, but she's still a Hindu. And it is against the law in Malaysia for a non Muslim to be in charge of raising and the guardianship of Muslim children. Through a legal battle, she was able to get back custody of her kids, even though she's not a Muslim. And she said that since her children have come back into her life and she's been raising them, again, they've stopped doing Islamic things. They do Hindu traditions again like they used to. Her daughter doesn't wear the headscarf. And in fact, she basically has to live with her children in a secluded life because her neighbors will film her children on the playground showing how their daughter doesn't wear hijab and look at what she's doing to these Muslim kids. They harass her. She tries to hide the identity of her children so that they don't get harassed for not practicing Islamically, right? And so now this becomes a huge question because she wants to legally contest the conversion of her children. And what makes this historic in Malaysia is that there has been similar cases in the past, but what happened was that woman was like suing her husband personally. But what's happening in this case is that Loh is challenging this standard of law altogether. And so this has so much become so much more than just this woman and her family. When when the people ask it, "Oh, if you're successful, if you win, do what do you want?" And she's like, "I literally just want to be no one again. I literally just want no one to know who I am again." Because if she is successful in challenging this, the Muslim majority is interpreting this as a challenge to the might of Islam altogether, essentially. If she is successful in challenging this, realistically, she actually is challenging the dominance of Islam in Malaysia. If you think
All
about
for
it,
her
it's like
children.
not entirely like a right-wing narrative, right? It actually would be challenging the dominance of Islam and Sharia law because Malaysia has a Sharia secular system, quote unquote. It actually would be challenging those standards.
Yeah,
It would
yeah,
be an
yeah. Got it.
insane historic precedent in the country.
So,
And so people are coming after her hard. And there are political analysts saying that there is not the political will for this right now. That there is no political incentive to actually change these laws, even though they're completely ridiculous and unfair,
because they're afraid
because
of the
it
Muslim
would
might,
exactly.
Islamic might.
Exactly, and there would be such a political cost to them, and even there are people that come from a Malay Muslim background that are try to promote more democratic norms and challenge a lot of these things, and they are called traitors. They're called ethnic traitors. So oh, Adam, you're actually from Malaysia. Can you give us some insight about, like, what you know about this case and what people are saying from inside the country? Like, I would love your insider perspective, so to speak. Um, but Armin, with all that extra context that I just provided, like, what do you think?
Um, I want just to put it in perspective. This woman, for her children, is going to war with the entirety, with the legal system of a country and the might of Islam uh, for her children. That is pretty badass, I might say. Some might say.
Seriously.
Yeah,
Seriously.
like just one ordinary average lady against the Islamic community of her country, in her country, and an ancient religion that doesn't kid around when it comes to dominance and staying in power, and the legal system of a modern country. Just 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 one side, one woman against all of that. I mean, if you win, you lose. If you lose, you lose too. Because if you win, then you have. I don't know. I don't think she can. It seems like it's really hard for her to win. But if she wins, then she has to walk around that country with her children, with Muslims knowing that you reduce the dominance of my religion in this country, in this entirety of this country.
You made it
That is
easier
very,
for other people to rescind upon their conversion, for other children to be deconverted. Because
or
when I
just
yeah, go ahead.
not even this just law specifically. You normalize a reduction in Sharia law's influence within the legal system, which it can
Mhm,
open the door to many other ways of challenging the Islamic law within that country.
mhm.
And just a reminder, Malaysia, who some people like Reza Aslan consider a good example of how moderate and modern and advanced a country could be even under Islam, right? Is where I first received my first threats of beheading.
Mm,
Yes. Remember, Malaysia is a country where resulted in atheism being mentioned in the United Nations Security Council, being mentioned for the very first time by the CFA, because Malaysia's government went after atheist republic members. The deputy minister announced that they need to hunt down atheist republic members within Malaysia because of atheist republic's consulate being active there, right? And this was the first time that atheism made it all the way to the United Nations Security Council because of this issue. So we have a history with Malaysia and their fight against um, specifically Malay people not being Muslim, right? Because they can't see somebody being Malay and not Muslim at the same time. So that's a different thing. But that's the environment that we're talking about. I've never received a threat of being beheading until that happened, and I received it first from Malaysia. I didn't receive my first beheading threat from Pakistan, Iran, or Saudi Arabia. I received it from Malaysia. Yeah.
yeah.
So
I
yeah.
think this woman is a complete badass. I don't have insight into how likely her success is based on what I've read. It doesn't seem super likely. But cuz she was rejected previously and now she's appealing again. Um and I don't know. What I wanted to say is that when I was this was covered in NPR, which is technically like a public radio for the United States, but it's actually like very capital P progressive, like left leaning. And I was my standard for them is so low at this point that I was actually impressed that in their article they explicitly talk about how once you convert, there is no way out of Islam. They talk about that. I'm like, "Oh, wait, you guys are actually being honest about that? Nice.
Mm,
Nice." And this also made me think about how, it just so many of the stories we covered this week in particular, like this story, the one about women in male guardianship, the honor violence, like, it just was reiterating to me over and over again just the level of domination that is a part of this ideology. And
yeah.
even in a
All
case like
around.
this, when a woman had her children taken away from her and a legal process, meaning the conversion, was initiated without her permission while her children were kidnapped by her abusive husband, that is less important than the domination of Islam in this case. Just this week, it was just really, I don't know. What do you think? I just felt like it was just reiterated over and over again.
What? What was what was?
I don't just this theme of totalitarian control.
Yes. Yeah. 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 I mean, it's in the Quran that you're supposed to fight until the entirety of the planet, the world becomes Islamic. That's specifically mentioned in the Quran.
Yeah.
Anyways, Adam that from Malaysia just mentioned a few comments. I don't know if you wanted to highlight. I starred them for you in
Oh,
case you want
nice.
to.
So he gave some insight into how what the rhetoric in Malaysia is. He said they won't risk publicity on this case in case she wins. The Chinese are pretty rich. That might get her some mileage. But from what I've read, she's just like a street vendor. She doesn't sound like she's super wealthy. Um,
Mm,
and nothing about it appears in our media. It's censored, I guess.
mm.
Interesting.